Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the first launch webinar for the Emissions Trading Worldwide Status Report 2026. My name is Stefano De Clara, and I'm the head of the ICAP Secretariat, and I will be moderating today's launch webinar. We are still letting people in from the waiting room, and we're getting starting on the technical side. So we will slowly start to dive into the webinar in a second. But I just wanted to say that we're quite happy and proud of once again launching the yearly ETS status report. It's a big piece of work for us at ICAP, and it is also a flagship publication in the ETS and carbon pricing space. So I'm quite happy that we will have the chance today to spend the next 90 minutes or so talking about what are the key trends, outlook, data, and insights coming out of this year's status report, which basically speaks to the state of play in development and implementation of emission trading system globally. And then we will also take some time to talk and hear from some of the key policymakers involved in the development and operation of these systems. And we'll get to hear their perspectives on the developments in their jurisdictions. If we go on to the next slide, also to provide a bit of context on why we're here today talking about this. ICAP is the International Carbon Action Partnership, and we are an international forum that brings together 45 national and subnational governments that get together under the auspices of ICAP to jointly work on ETS design and implementation. As ICAP, and especially we in the ICAP Secretariat, tends to facilitate this work through promoting technical dialogue between member governments and observers. We also do quite a lot of capacity building to try and help and assist new governments with the development of emission trading systems. And last but not least, we also do knowledge sharing work on the state of play in ETS globally. And the yearly status report fits into this third area of work. And every year we try to condense the key insights and information on the state of play for ETS globally in this publication. If we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what we are about to do. So we start with welcome and introduction, and I'll be giving the floor to Jean-Yves Benoit in a second, who is the co-chair of ICAP and also works at the Quebec Ministry for Environment and operates the Quebec ETS. After that, we'll go into a presentation of the key highlights from the ICAP ETS Status Report 2026, and I'll be giving the floor to my colleagues Alex and Anna, who will take you through some of the key insights out of this year's status report. And then, as I was mentioning, we will go into a panel discussion, and we are lucky today to be joined by a great set of panelists coming from some of the key jurisdictions that have shown remarkable developments over the last few months. And we'll be hearing from them their experiences with the last year of ETS operation or preparation in their jurisdiction, but also we will get to hear from them what is coming next in their jurisdictions. And I'm quite excited to do all of that in a second. Before we dive in on the content and on the panel discussion, I will be giving the floor to Jean-Yves for a quick welcome remark from his side. Jean-Yves, I hope you can hear us and see us. Over to you.
Thank you, Stefano. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, good. Well, welcome everyone to this presentation of the ICAP Status Report 2026. It is an honor for me to co-chair ICAP. As a start, I would like to give my warm thank you to all the ICAP team for once again drafting such a thorough, comprehensive status report of all the different ETSs around the world. Thank you also to all our partners that contributed by giving all the information for the ICAP Secretariat to put together this report. That is honestly the report we use all the time, especially for our new government, new minister, new chief of staff. Very useful. During the last year, there was some pretty strong face win on the climate file. But regardless of that, we saw some global progression. The momentum did not stop. New ETSs saw the day. New members joined ICAP. If we look at the last conference of party in Belém, the declaration for the Open Coalition was launched, signed by many governments, really looking for more coordination pertaining to carbon pricing and ETSs around the world. Those are very good progress. Honestly, I'm quite optimistic that 2026 will see once again new system being developed, new collaboration take place among governments, and more fight to reduce greenhouse gas emission because we're already living the impacts. So with that, we're going to have a great hour and a half in front of us. Stefano, I will leave you back the floor. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Thank you, Jean-Yves. And I also wanted to echo your thank you to both the ICAP team, who worked really, really hard over the last 6 months or so to deliver this report, and also to all ICAP members, observers, other governments that have supported, and the partners that support us in the report production process. As you said, Jean-Yves, it's a invaluable resource. It's also, it takes a lot of work and commitment in the making. So I'm really, really grateful to the team, to the members, observers, and other partners and governments that help us in the process. This wouldn't be possible without the combined efforts of all these players together. With that, one quick note of housekeeping to say that after the panel discussion, we are also keen to have a Q&A with the audience. And as always, we want to reserve some time to see what questions and comments you might have either on the report or on the panel discussion. To do that, make use of the Q&A function of the webinar. Even throughout the discussion, feel free to already send the questions and comments as they come up, and we will get to them after the panel discussion in the Q&A. And don't hesitate to raise any question, doubt, comment you might have. With that, it's time to dive into the substance of today's webinar. And I'll be giving the floor to my colleague Alex, who will start taking us through some of the key highlights from the status report. Alex, over to you.
Great, thanks a lot, Stefano. Thanks also, Jean-Yves. Let's take a look at some of these key highlights. First of all, looking at the ICAP status report, which is our flagship publication. This year is actually our 13th publication of the ICAP status report. It has become actually a comprehensive global overview of compliance emissions trading. This year, it contains 57 different fact sheets. So we're tracking every system currently in force, under development, or under consideration worldwide. It also includes a trends and outlook chapter setting out the major themes shaping global ETS landscape over the last year. We have 12 infographics, so these are data visualizations. They cover everything from emissions coverage and sectoral scope, revenues, offset use, and more. And to note that the full report is available now from download to download from the ICAP website. So yeah, we encourage you to get in, explore the infographics, enjoy the editorial, but also yeah, feel free to use those fact sheets in your work as well. They have been put together and very painstakingly checked also by our partners. So yeah, please feel free to use those in your work. Looking at some of the key trends that we've drawn from the sort of the overview that we have, looking at the details, pulling these together, we've pulled together some of what we think are the key trends and outlook for ETS over the last year and looking forward. So really, it has been quite a turbulent, let's call it a turbulent geopolitical landscape over the last year. So there's trade tensions, affordability pressures, in some countries actually a visible retreat from climate ambition. So despite this, the global momentum behind emissions trading has not slowed, actually quite the opposite. So just as an example, there are new national systems in Japan, India, and Vietnam, another 16 in the pipeline. Currently, there's 41 systems that are now in force worldwide, and they're covering more than a quarter of global GHG emissions. These are also big jurisdictions. Operating ETS represents 63% of global GDP and more than half of the world's population now. So even a closer look than that shows that ETS sits now at the center of NDC strategies across many of the major economies, so particularly in the G20. What we find now is actually emissions trading is no longer a niche policy tool. It's actually becoming part of the architecture of the global climate response. As a next point, we see the next generation of ETS that are coming through. So we see that systems are being designed not just as replicas of established cap and trade models, but as tailored instruments that really reflect their domestic development pathways. So we see there's a rapid uptake of hybrid and intensity-based approaches, especially in emerging economies. So these are also potentially transitioning to absolute caps over time as well. So India and Vietnam are prime examples. These are intensity-based systems, new intensity-based systems with transition pathways built in. We also see coming through integrated policy frameworks. They're combining ETS in novel ways with other instruments such as carbon taxes and offsets, particularly carbon crediting mechanisms. They're growing in strategic importance. And this is alongside early links to Article 6 as well. If we look in at then established systems, there seems to be a shift from incremental reforms to real structural transformation actually. So ETS they're widening the coverage into more complex sectors. They are refining their core market rules. Some looking forward to net zero removals are beginning to feature more prominently, and also revenue use is really becoming more targeted. It's supporting both decarbonisation and really supporting in different ways social fairness as well. So some examples of this: China's announcement of a roadmap to a transition from intensity-based cap to absolute cap is a good example of this structural development. Their coverage has already expanded to steel, cement, and aluminium, and it is set to expand even further. So another example, California has newly legislated through to 2045, really establishing the system. The EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism has now entered its compliance phase. So the direction of travel is quite clear. There's tighter caps, broader sectoral coverage, deeper alignment with the net zero pathways. That's what we're seeing now as well, which is fantastic. So further, the outlook. So looking ahead, managing competitiveness is really on the agenda. Carbon market coherence. So bringing together this kind of domestic first approach into a more globally coherent response, and acceptance, political acceptance, public acceptance is also crucial. So approaches to leakage protection continue to evolve. There is growing interest in these CBAM, these carbon border adjustment mechanism style tools. Public acceptance, political acceptance, it remains critical, and it's supported by transparent revenue use and clear communication. We see here 2025 marked a new record for ETS revenues, so nearly 80 billion collected globally. how those revenues are spent is increasingly central to the political sustainability of the system. So we see in California and Washington, this explicit rebranding as Cap and Invest. In Europe, we see the ETS, the EU ETS2 actually would not be politically feasible without the Social Climate Fund accompanying this. So these things, they're not just communication strategies. These are actually becoming a prerequisite for maintaining public trust in carbon pricing. Aside from that, we see also, Johnny's mentioned this, so stronger international alignment with new initiatives, new platforms to exchange. This is also becoming essential. Jurisdictions are looking to find out what the common principles are, being able to realistically compare their ambition, and find out where they can find greater coherence across this expanding and diversifying global carbon market. So we'll take a look now just at some of the headline figures. So here, like I mentioned, 41 systems now in force worldwide. Approximately 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions directly covered. GDP from jurisdictions that have an established ETS now are 63%, and more than half of the world's population. 14 of the G20 nations now have an ETS in place, and this is also set to increase in the next year. Yeah, since now from 2007, since the EU ETS came online, there's been over 454 billion US dollars raised in revenue so far. So these are not marginal numbers. They reflect a policy instrument that has moved well beyond pilot status into the mainstream of global climate policy. It's functioning in very diverse settings, and it's our privilege here to be able to look at this and to see this overview and to look at the progress that has been made. I'd like to take you now on a quick journey around the world of ETS over the last year. I'm just going to mention some of the major developments in emissions trading. I'll start in the middle with Europe. So the ETS, it remains the world's largest carbon market by trading value and volume. 2025 brought two landmark milestones. So shipping companies face their first deadline for surrendering allowances, and the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism entered its compliance phase in January of this year. First surrender of CBAM certificates due in September 2027. Free allowances for aviation were fully phased out as of 2026. Coming up, there's the EU ETS2 covering buildings and road transport. Implementation has been postponed by 1 year to 2028. Also, the EU Council has granted the European Commission mandate to open formal linking talks with the UK. Looking at the UK, the UK is also expanding. So maritime coverage is confirmed from mid-2026, and waste incineration from 2028, and engineered GHG removals from 2029. Also, one to note, on the doorstep of Europe there, Turkey is right on the cusp of launching its pilot ETS this year. So this is what we're expecting coming up shortly, actually. So moving across to North America. So California's landmark legislation reauthorizes this what was its cap and trade and is now a cap and invest program through to 2045. On the other coast, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, completed its third program review with reforms from 2027. There we see, even though Pennsylvania formally ended its participation, now Virginia is set to rejoin. We see also Oregon entered its first compliance year in 2025. Colorado held its first annual auctions, and in Washington, their rulemaking was advanced to enable future linkage with the WCI jurisdictions of California and Quebec. North from there, Canada consumer carbon charge was eliminated. But really with a focus on the output-based pricing systems that are now across many of the provinces in Canada. We're going to move across to the east now with a quick look at the Asia Pacific. China's national ETS announced a roadmap to transition from intensity-based cap to absolute cap, and expanded coverage to steel, cement, and aluminium. This added some 3 billion tons of emissions under the carbon market there. Where we see also some real development here, Japan's GX ETS transition from voluntary to a mandatory national system. India's carbon credit trading system has gone into binding emissions intensity targets for 7 industrial sectors. Also, Vietnam has launched the pilot ETS, has actually entered into force now, and Indonesia has expanded its ETS significantly. Furthermore, the long-running system of Korea has entered its 4th allocation period with increasing stringency and design development there. We're going to take a quick look at Latin America as well. We'll hear soon also from Jose Pedro that we'll be able to talk about how Brazil has been building institutional infrastructure for its ETS. There also Chile has now published a national roadmap on carbon pricing, and Colombia's regulatory framework is progressing to preliminary phase. Mexico also published its updated sectoral program alongside its NDC 3, pledging net zero by mid-century there, with ETS taking a central role in meeting those targets. So there's a lot of fantastic developments all over the world, and these developments are really expanded on in the status report. I invite you to look deeper in there as well. I would then like to pass over to my colleague Anna. She's going to take you through some of the key infographics that we've put together in the status report and a short discussion on them. Over to you, Anna.
Yes. Much, Alex. Yes, as you said, I will try to guide you through some of the infographics that we feature in this year's status report. The first one is a classic. It's the historical expansion of the emissions that are covered by emission trading systems. And as in the past years, because since 2005, we have an increase in covered emissions by emission trading systems, and 2026 was no exception of that. We also have an increase, and we have 26% of emissions that are covered by emission trading systems. This is mainly due to 3 new systems that are introduced. So Alex already mentioned, it's the one in India, in Japan, and in Vietnam. Vietnam already included compliance obligation for the year 2025, which you can see in the stripe bar on the 2025 larger bar. What we changed a little bit from last year's graphic is that we color-coded the single systems in the color of their region. So in the pie chart, you can actually see really nicely that 3/4 of global emissions covered by emission trading systems are covered by systems in the Asia-Pacific region. This is also not to a small part due to the Chinese system, which covers already, I think, 8 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. Going to the next infographic. This is a new one that we feature in this year's report, and you can see that ETS has been an important instrument for climate change mitigation in larger economies. This infographic shows us 2 things. The first thing is we see the proportion or covered emissions by ETS systems in proportion to, on the left-hand side, global emissions, and on the right-hand side, G20 emissions. The second thing we see is in the lighter shade blue bars in the middle, which is the lower and the higher bound estimate of emissions that may be covered by systems which are currently under consideration or under development. So whereas the vast majority of emissions that currently or that are currently covered by an ETS system come from jurisdictions which are within the G20 region, which you can see that the two dark shade blue bars are almost the same height. Most of the emissions that may be covered from ETSs that are currently under development or under consideration are outside of the G20 countries, which you can see that the two lighter blue bar is a bit larger in the global one than in the G20 bar. We also have some explanations on the assumptions that we used for the estimates, which you can find in the notes and methods and sources in our report in the back. Coming to the next infographic is another classic that we feature in every year's status report, where you can see that emission trading systems cover a very wide variety of economic sectors. You can see that each of these wedges in the wheel is one system that has an emission trading system in place. And on the outer side, you can see the percentage of emissions that are covered within that system. Then in the rings around, you can see that each ring represents one of the economic sectors that are covered in ETS systems. With the industry sector, which is the light blue one, is covered in most systems, followed by the power sector, which is the darker blue one, and the mining and extractives, the gray one. But in recent years, there has been an increase in interest in covering fossil fuel combustion, also from sectors in the transport, maritime, and other sectors. There's only one sector, which is the forestry sector, that is only covered by one system, by the New Zealand ETS. Coming to our next infographic. Yes, so another key design question in emission trading is whether a system sets an absolute cap on total emissions, so a fixed ceiling, or whether it is used as an intensity-based approach, where the emission limits is tied to output or activity levels rather than a hard number. So in other words, like the more you produce, the more emissions headroom you get. On this map, systems with an absolute cap are shown in the dark blue shade, and those with an intensity-based requirements are in the light blue shade. And in the pie chart, you can see, or the pie chart shows the share of global covered ETS emissions by each cap type. So Alex already hinted at it earlier, but one reason why jurisdictions may opt for an intensity-based cap is often the economic context. So growing and emerging economies in particular tend to prefer this approach as it avoids penalizing economic expansion. And Alex also mentioned that Chinese is actually the first country to formally announce plans to transition from an intensity-based system to an absolute cap, and it will be interesting to see if other emerging economies will follow that example. But in general, that the regional distribution on this map really underlines that there is a diversity of approaches in emission tradings globally, and serves also as a reminder that ETS is not a one-size-fits-all instrument. It can really be tailored to the specific economic, political, and developmental context of the jurisdictions. Going to the next one. It's another key design feature of ETSs is also the approach on offset use as a potential compliance option. Depending on the system design and also the goal that the ETS is seeking to achieve, allowing offsets as an alternative compliance mechanism could expand the carbon price to non-regulated sectors, to increase financial flows for these sectors to achieve abatement, and also increase the flexibility in compliance for regulated entities. So in this infographic, we see that jurisdictions that do not allow for offset credits for compliance, they are depicted in yellow. We can see those allowing the use of offset credits with some quantitative limits in light blue, and those allowing unlimited offset credits in the dark blue shade. Additionally, we have some jurisdictions that allow international offset credit use. Those you can see in the overlaid pink striped shape. Yes, going to the next infographic. So that's also a new one we feature in this year's report. So for systems that do allow offset credits. This infographic shows the potential offset credit demand. And this is important also to stress, it is not the actual offset credit use. So this one contrasts the ETS emission coverage, which you can see in dark blue, so the cap, against the theoretical maximum offset credits that is allowed under each system quantitative limits, which you can see in the light blue color. I don't have it on here right now, but if we sum across those systems, we can see that we have a potential demand of around 1,370 million tons of CO2 from compliance obligations. A substantial figure, but we have to see it in the context that a bulk of this demand sit within domestic systems, so each with their own eligibility rules. So credits valid in one jurisdiction may not qualify for another one. So beyond that, also carbon price levels and transaction costs can equally make offsets an uneconomic practice. So while the headline figure is significant, actual demand is considerably lower. Heading to the next infographic. Yes, that's also one that we feature in each year's status report. Here we present the yearly revenues that are raised by ETSs over time. ETSs usually raise revenues by the sale of allowances and compliance credits, or also payments to funds or equivalent compliance mechanisms. And in 2025, Systems and Force raised a record high of revenues, almost $80 billion. So as Alex also mentioned earlier, since 2007, this accumulates to $454 billion that have been raised in ETSs in force. Going over to our next and last infographic, we see how these ETS revenues are used. So it gets revenues get directed towards societal objectives shaped by each jurisdictional regulatory, also political priorities. So what we see in this infographic, it shows the diversity of goals that ETSs direct their revenues towards, and it reflects the committed revenue use categories, but not the actual proportion allocated to each, which it's important to note. So some jurisdictions, they channel their revenues straight into a general budget, but others earmark them for specific purposes, such as climate change mitigation or low carbon innovation. And especially, as we heard before, in times of political headwinds we're facing at the moment, this is really arguably where it gets politically interesting, because how revenues are spent can be decisive for political and public acceptance for carbon pricing, and particularly where spending is visibly tied to low carbon transition or provides tangible relief for those that are most affected. So with that, please check the report. There are more exciting infographics to discover, and we're happy to discuss them with you. Going to the next slide, you can see the status report. Yes, the status report and all ICAP publications you can also find on our website. And with that, I will hand over to Stefano.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Alex, for taking us through so much content in a relatively short amount of time. And obviously, lots of insights and takeaways to dissect. We will start doing that now in the panel discussion. But again, I would also be quite keen to get reactions and questions from the audience. So don't hesitate to use the Q&A function of the webinar to flag anything that you would like to raise in the Q&A segment later on. We should have probably also told this sooner, but the report is available as of yesterday on our website. So please visit our website, and you will be able to find the report there. If we go on to the next slide, I will quickly introduce the panelists. And again, we are lucky to be joined by some of the policymakers that come up quite predominantly in the status report as jurisdictions that are showing really interesting developments. And so we're lucky to have them with us on the webinar today to dive a bit deeper into what we just heard from Alex and Anna. So I'll introduce them quickly, and then I will give them the floor to dive into the panel discussion. But I would like to welcome Ruben Vermeeren from DG Clima at the European Commission, Rufina Achampong from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero in the United Kingdom, Mark Cipolla from the California Air Resources Board in California, Andrew Hayes from the State Department of Ecology in Washington State, and José Pedro Bastos Neves from the Ministry of Finance in Brazil. So welcome all. Thank you for joining us. And perhaps we will start going through the panel in that order. So starting from Ruben. And as a quick first round of panel discussion, I will ask each one of you two main things. So first of all, whether anything that Anna and Alex presented or anything out of the report, if you had time to read it since last night, has caught your attention, or if anything stands out or anything you want to highlight. And the second thing would be to then give us a bit of a perspective and a few insights on developments over the last few months in your jurisdiction, but also especially what lies ahead for you. And with that, let's start from Ruben.
Thank you, Stefano, and thanks a lot for all the work that you and the team have done on the report. I have to admit I did not read the report yet. I only looked at the slides, but I'm sure the report will be as beautiful this year as it has been in previous years. As Jean-Yves said, it's a great resource. We use it a lot, especially for informing our hierarchy and the politicians when they meet with third countries. What does the system look like? What are its pros? What are its cons? Its design mechanisms. It also gives you the bigger picture of the global developments, and I think especially the infographics, they do a very good job there. One thing that struck me most probably is, and I know we're in the America session and there's the Asian session tomorrow, but it's probably the progress in Asia. I think 80% of ETS emissions being covered by Asian ETSs. That's quite an impressive percentage. But okay, China always indeed makes a very big impact. And it also looks, in fact, like India, Japan, Vietnam, these are big countries, and still you see only a relatively small increase in total emissions that are covered. I'm not sure that it has to do with the fact that these are relatively limited ETSs, or whether it has to do with the fact that China is so big and everything you put next to it looks small in comparison. I think most of the infographics, they beg the question, what is behind these numbers? I know this is a factual report, but what it does is it invites, it's thought-provoking, invites further research. And I know that you are doing a lot of that research also separately in your other work streams. For example, looking at this trend of intensity-based systems, looking at the trend of accepting mostly domestic offsets for compliance reasons. I think those are elements that are very interesting to understand better, to see how well are all these relatively new systems doing. Really, because I think you focus a lot on revenues, a bit less, I think, in the presentation, at least on prices. And you see these Asian schemes that cover 80%, they basically don't even make it to the slide when you look at the revenues. There are simply no revenues because there's no auctioning and everything is given out for free. I think what we are realizing, and that's why it's been a turbulent year also on the EU side, is that what matters is what the companies pay. We are now phasing out free allocation for important sectors because the CBAM is coming in. The companies are finally realizing that when they see a 75 euro carbon price, it means they're going to have to pay 75 euros and not 7.50 euro because 90% was free allocation. And I think that really makes a big difference and makes it, for us, for policymakers, makes it a lot harder to defend and sell the system. It does also mean that you have a lot higher revenues, of course, because everything you don't give away for free, you auction off and you can redistribute. Maybe to quickly go into the second part of your question, an update on our ETS. As I said, or as Alex said, a turbulent year, 2025. I think that's a good way to characterize it also for us in the EU. Starting maybe with the numbers, which we just published 4 days ago. You can see a press release on our website. For 2025, emissions reduced by 1.3% year on year. So that's good. I mean, it's continuing the trend of lower emissions every year. At the same time, it's not good enough. We have an absolute cap. It's declining by 4.4% every year. So those are really big chunks, 4.4% of 2005 emissions, not 4.4% compared to last year. So 1.3 year on year is not keeping the pace. Still, zooming out, we're at more than minus 50% compared to when we started for these sectors. We need to go to minus 62 by 2030. So it's challenging. We have still 5 years to go to make these additional 12% emission reductions, again, compared to 2005. The electricity sector is always the key sector still now, even though it's decarbonizing rapidly. But also there we see a relatively small emission reduction, 0.4%, despite more renewables having been installed. But we had a relatively dry year with not so much wind. Actually, it was very good weather. There was a lot of solar. So solar has compensated for less hydro and less wind. There was also increase in electricity consumption. So overall, we still have reduced emissions from the electricity sector, but nowhere near the 25% we had a couple of years ago. Coal continued to drop, gas-fired power plants increased. And on the industry side, it's always more difficult. We see there steel, cement, chemicals, they reduced their emissions with 2.5%. And we need to do more work to see exactly how much of that is decarbonization and how much of that is output reductions. And I think I say every year we need to do more work to look into that, but I think this year we will really do it because we have a contract that is assessing these sector-specific trends. Because indeed, industrial decarbonization is, I think, for us, topic number one, both politically, but I think also for the ETS. If you see the power sector going well, and you know that the next set of marginal abatement technologies are in the industrial sectors, then we need to see whether they can actually make the transition what they need. ETS is just one part of the policy framework. They need support. They need enabling conditions, infrastructure, grids, especially, but also CO2 infrastructure. And we're talking a lot, and our political level is talking a lot to these industries. You can Google action plans for chemicals, for fertilizers, high-level dialogues with cement, with steel, with glass. And yeah, the idea is to see what they need and how they can decarbonize and how we can keep them competitive whilst decarbonizing, whilst transitioning, not just being competitive for the sake of being competitive and continuing to emit in the EU. That's not what we want. It's been a turbulent year because we've seen carbon prices at the end of last year increase. This was not so surprising for us. It was surprising for some. We know that the cap is declining rapidly. And at the same time, we're also doing a review that's coming in July, and we're also reviewing the benchmarks for free allocation. And that is always a period where companies position themselves, where they become quite vocal, because they want to ensure that for the next 5 years they have sufficient free allowances to cover their emissions. And at the same time, in the EU, and it's still ongoing, we have this energy price debate. And I'm afraid the ETS ended up very much in that energy price debate, also because there are very few parts of the electricity bill that you can do something about actively as a policy maker, and the ETS is probably the easiest way to get from one day to the next a discount on your electricity bill. And so we've been fighting, really fighting every day to explain why the ETS is part of the solution, not part of the problem, why the ETS is not such a big part of the final electricity bill of consumers. I think that fight is still ongoing. We've had to not give away, but we've had to make some concessions here and there. I think the ETS2, you said it already, was postponed by a year. It's unfortunate, it's disappointing, but it's still alive. It's going to happen in 2028. That's what we are working towards. We also had to front load part of our review that is coming in July. So on the 1st of April, we published a legislative proposal to amend the market stability reserve and stop the invalidation of allowances in there. And there's no time to explain that now, but it's something I think that's not necessarily a bad idea, but it was useful to do it now and in this context of the energy crisis. 1 minute on the ETS review. It's coming in July. Of course, it's impacted a lot by all these discussions. It's also impacted by the new 2040 target that I have to mention. So that's, I think, probably the biggest news of 2025. Agreement on a EU economy-wide climate target of 90% compared to 1990, with the possibility for the EU to meet 5%, up to 5% of that 90% with international credits. That means a comeback of the EU in the area of international credits. And then, depending on what the percentage would be, domestically, we have to do a bit less. So if we buy 5% international credits, domestically, we can do 85%. And domestically, we can also design then an ETS that makes a commensurate contribution to that 85%. That could be 84, 86, or 87. But that is what we will propose in July, somewhere mid-July is when that will come. That will be the key element of the ETS. What does the cap look like going out to 2040? How do we take into account those international credits that will be bought economy-wide? How do we integrate permanent domestic carbon removals, so negative emissions in the ETS? It's something we will do, and we have announced to do, but where there are very many different ways of doing it, as ICAP knows better than anybody. And then we will also revise, of course, the free allocation framework, a look again at the CBAM phase-in schedule, again with the idea of having sufficient emission space for the hardest to abate sectors. MSR on the market stability reserve will be further reviewed. Yeah, I think that's the most important. And I'll finish with linking with the UK, because we're handing over now to the UK. I think as we speak, the negotiations are ongoing, usually on the Wednesday afternoons. So my colleague is also not here today, but I think those are progressing well without being able to say anything about the content of those. And I'll hand over back to you, Stefan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ruben. Just a couple of things on your plate and on your colleagues' plate as you get into this year. So thanks for fighting the fight, and good luck with all that upcoming work. You did touch on a number of elements that I would be keen to come back to, time permitting, after the first round of panel discussion, because I think some of these key trends, especially around public acceptance, affordability, and industrial decarbonization, are shared topic and issues across many of the ETSs. But before we do that, let's move on to Rufina before we jump over the pond and we go to North and South American colleagues. Rufina, as Ruben hinted at, the UK is also quite busy on linking, but also on other topics. So I'll go to you next with the same couple of questions. Anything that caught your attention out of Anna's and Alex's presentation? And can you give us a super quick update on what the UK has been up to on ETS developments?
Yeah, thank you, Stefano. So hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here because I want to say thank you firstly to ICAP, and congratulations. Your annual status report is a huge achievement, and it continues to be a very much valued resource for us policymakers. There are really 3 areas that I really want to comment on briefly, hopefully. It's great to be able to see the continued uptake of ETSs and the developments worldwide, with 41 ETSs now in operation and many more in development. And we also want to highlight the areas that expansion especially is encouraging to see that emerging economies are now driving our new generation of systems. There's also expansion into the harder to abate sectors, and this marks a good turning point. The report highlights a clear shift from power sector systems to broader economy-wide coverage, including industry, maritime transport, buildings, and road transport. And this is signaling greater ambition, but also more complex political and equity challenges. As carbon pricings continue to expand globally, we've seen an evolving of innovative design choices that are key to keeping these schemes flexible and ensuring that they can be tailored to diverse political and economic circumstances. Design choices are also increasingly about durability and political acceptance. We've seen a strong emphasis on embedding ETSs into wider climate laws, improving revenue recycling, aligning systems with social fairness, and including the rise of cap and invest approaches and instruments like EU's Social Climate Fund to support public acceptance. Secondly, we see ETS momentum is holding up despite the political headwinds, and this is one of the most striking features of the report. It's apparently a paradox. Even energy security concerns and all these affordability pressures are challenging climate ambition, and yet emissions trading continues to expand and mature, with 3 new national systems launching and policymaking momentum is holding steady. By design, our emission trading systems are intended to guide investment and decision-making over the long term. So uncertainty or volatility can therefore be especially problematic, where it risks weakening confidence in the effectiveness of these instruments. For us policymakers, a central challenge is to offer greater certainty and clear long-term signals. And this is something we are actively considering in relation to the future direction of the UK ETS and how we provide lasting confidence in the scheme. Thirdly, the report is highlighting a shift from purely domestic ETS design towards greater global coherence, driven by CBAM's Article 6 and a new cooperation platforms. And this gives a growing sense that systems are stronger when they learn from each other. It's worth noting the continued expansion of the ETS coverage in more established schemes. This is an area where we in the UK are actively keen to learn more from others. So, for example, we have held a series of technical exchanges with Quebec to share experiences on the use of greenhouse gas removals with the ETS and within the ETS, helping us to shape some of our policy proposals. We are very pleased to see the latest edition of this ICAP report. It continues to be a highly valued resource that we really rely on. And for us, international engagement and collaboration on emissions trading remains core priorities. The UK is committed to supporting jurisdictions that are developing and designing their own ETSs. And so we've led a number of workshops on capacity building sessions, some in collaboration with ICAP and others through our UK Pact, with UK policymakers engaging directly with counterparts in other governments. This work is further strengthened by organizations such as ICAP, who always play a vital role in bringing jurisdictions together, and facilitating our shared learning. So I think I've really given myself a lot of time to tell you about this report, but I'll quickly go on to an update on our UK ETS developments from last year. Generally, for those who don't know much about our ETS, just give you a two-line background. It's been in operation now for 5 years. It was introduced in 2021 following the UK's exit from the EU ETS. And it is run by our UK ETS authority, which consists of governments in the UK, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Our scheme covers emissions from energy-intensive industries, the power sector, and aviation, and it currently represents a quarter of the UK's emissions. A lot has happened over the last year. In 2025, the UK ETS authority focused on delivering previously signaled reforms, while we also prepared the system for expansion and beginning to shape the post-2030 framework. In February, the authority launched a consultation on extending the UK ETS cap beyond 2030, providing an important step towards longer-term certainty. Then in July, interim consultation responses confirmed the next phase of scope expansion, including the inclusion of domestic maritime emissions from July this year, alongside voluntary monitoring, reporting, and verification for waste incineration and energy from waste from January 2026, ahead of full inclusion from 2028. At the same time, the authority set out plans to integrate UK-based engineered greenhouse gas removals from 2029, and this is subject to further consultations and legislation. The proposed inclusion of engineered greenhouse gas removals, specifically bioenergy and carbon capture and storage BECCS and direct air carbon capture and storage DACs into our UK ETS is a key step in supporting the UK's legally binding net zero targets and in incentivizing investment by providing a significant source of demand for GGRs from polluting sectors. Finally, in November, further detail was published on maritime inclusion. This confirmed the design for domestic maritime coverage, including cap adjustments, defined exemptions, a delay for offshore vessels until January 2027, and a commitment to future reviews. Alongside this, the authority also consulted on extending the UK ETS to international maritime voyages from 2028, proposing coverage of 50% of emissions from voyages starting or ending in the UK. On free allocation, 2025 was an important year in setting the direction of travel. In November, we published the outcome of the free allocation review, concluding a detailed multi-year review of how free allowances are distributed to industry. This publication set out the free allocation rules for the 2027 to 2030 period, including the process for setting benchmarks, measuring carbon leakage risk, and accounting for activity level changes. We also confirmed a gradual phase out of free allocation for sectors covered by the UK Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism from 2027, based on an indicative 9-year trajectory. The overarching aim is to ensure carbon leakage risks continue to be effectively mitigated and a joined-up approach that enables the UK ETS to work effectively alongside the UK CBAM from its introduction next year. That's 2027. Turning to UK Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, the UK has now put the legislative framework in place. So through the Finance Bill 2025-26, we have legislated to introduce a UK CBAM from 1st January 2027. At launch, this will apply to aluminium, cement, fertilizers, hydrogen, and iron and steel, ensuring that carbon leakage risks are addressed as the UK ETS continues to tighten. Looking ahead, a number of important changes are either already underway or coming to force across our UK ETS. From the start of this year, free allocation for the aviation sector has been fully phased out, reflecting a further tightening of incentives within the scheme. In addition, January 2026 marked the beginning of the voluntary monitoring, reporting, and verification period for the energy from waste and waste incineration sectors as a key preparatory step ahead of future inclusion. We've also continued to strengthen price stability. On 8th April, the UK ETS auction reserve price was increased from £22 to £28, reinforcing the carbon price signal. Later this year, from July, the UK ETS will expand to cover the domestic maritime sector, further increasing the proportion of UK emissions covered. Alongside this, we are also continuing preparations for the launch of the UK CBAM on 1st January, which will play a complementary role in addressing carbon leakage and supporting competitiveness. And looking further ahead, the UK ETS will continue a second phase from 2031 to 2040, providing longer-term continuity for the scheme. Finally, maybe I don't even have to say this because it's been said already, at the UK-EU summit last May, it was announced that the UK and the EU have agreed to work towards linking the UK and ETS, UK ETS and EU ETS, sorry. Details will need to be worked through as part of the negotiation process. So there's a great deal happening in the UK at the moment, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rufina, for the really comprehensive update. Let's jump over to the pond now, and maybe we'll start from Mark first. And I will ask you, Mark, to quickly cover the same 2 points. So anything that stood out for you, and tell us a bit more about what happened in California and what is next.
Thanks, Stefano. Mark Sepola here from the California Cap and Invest program. Really appreciate the release of the report, as always. I think, maybe just thinking about my receiving of the report, I find it encouraging. Really broadly, there's a lot of political headwinds that carbon pricing is going up against, energy prices, affordability, yet we see in this report facts and data are showing continued expansion, continued growth, continued adoption and effectiveness. So I think that's the main thing I'm taking away is, despite forces working against, we're still making progress globally, and that's really great to see. The report is always very much appreciated by us. We rely on it just like everybody else does for a lot of things when we are assessing our own program. I think one thing that's really valuable about these reports is seeing, none of these programs are the same. So seeing how they're different and why they're different really informs and provides insights into the program that we're operating here in California. And I'm imagining people like those lessons are there, and so it makes them easy to absorb and contemplate. So just really want to express my appreciation for the hard work of doing this every year. It is extremely valuable, and it really does make me feel connected to a more global movement that is making progress. So wonderful to see. And transitioning to events in California, we are still making progress in our jurisdiction on the key feature. Emissions are going down still. We had year-over-year reductions the last couple years that were on the order of 3 to 5% within the state. So that was really great to see. And we've been extremely busy with proposing updates to our program. How we got here was legislation adopted last year, really directing us to consider some aspects of our program. We had an initial proposal that was released earlier this year in January. We received many public comments on that, and just yesterday we released an updated proposal. So less than 24 hours old, and the kind of headline features there are: we're removing some allowances from circulation. We've got a new provision where we are going to, after any offset credit is used for compliance, retire an allowance. So that's going to further constrict our budget. We received a lot of comment during the initial release about energy affordability and concerns about industrial leakage risk. So there are some elements that are responsive to that. We are generally increasing the share of the allowance pie that's going toward free allocation to manufacturing facilities to mitigate leakage. We also have a relatively new, a new type of conditional allowance allocation to manufacturing facilities where sort of an additional amount of free allowance allocation is tied to a requirement to reduce GHG emissions on site. So that could be through electrification or changing fuels. And some of this is responding to the broader conditions that we're in. We had a lot of manufacturing facilities under the previous federal administration that were queued up to receive grants and other funding for major industrial decarbonization projects that the current Trump administration has now rescinded. So there's sort of these plans, these activities that are underway without funding. And so we're looking to provide support in circumstances like that, but also incentivize additional action beyond that. California has a feature of free allowance allocation to the natural gas utilities and the electric utilities, which ultimately provides value directly on residential electric bills and natural gas bills, like a flat credit a couple times a year. Responding to some of the concerns about energy affordability, we are increasing that amount of free allocation to the electric utilities to the tune of about $2 billion over the next 4 years that will be directly put on as credits on residential electric bills. The legislation that was adopted last year also directed us to transition the free allowances that we do give to the natural gas utilities over to the electric utilities. So we're accelerating that transition, and that's further bolstering the credit that's appearing on the electric utility bills. And finally, the one kind of major piece of the proposal that came out yesterday was really not removing allocation from post 2030, but removing the specificity on that and deferring the conversation to a later date. So, we're really looking to provide some flexibility to the conversation to be responsive at another rulemaking. So we did just release this proposal yesterday. It's out for a comment period of 15 days. We're going to take this to our board to vote to adopt it or not in late May, so just 6 weeks away. And we're aiming to have the new rules that we're proposing effective by September this year. So we're on a fairly quick pace, and that's the next several months. And beyond that, we've been undertaking conversations with the state of Washington about potential linkage of our program with their program. And perhaps this is a good moment to step back and let Andy speak on those topics.
Thank you, Mark. And speaking of the state of Washington, Andy, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Stefano. Yeah, so I'll just briefly echo some of the things Mark said, in terms of my reaction to the report. Haven't fully processed everything in it. As always, dense and informative report. But it is really illuminating always to see kind of the visual representation of the collective work of our main jurisdictions. That's something that's really useful to me. It gives me a sense of perspective. We're, of course, very focused on the development of a regional carbon market by joining California and Quebec. And so, despite so that's kind of been our major focus. Obviously there are significant, as mentioned, political turbulence on climate policy, a lot of concern about high energy prices and a focus on affordability. So we're certainly are not escaping that either in Washington. But I would say despite these headwinds, we're still very focused on market stability and sustainability, continue to learn from other markets in the region and outside the region on key issues such as industrial regulation and leakage, carbon capture, utilization and sequestration, and environmental justice policies. So these are all areas, we're still very much in a building mode for our program, and the models that are in other ETSs have been really fantastically useful to us towards developing our own policies, which are still very much in development, though we've had our program in place now for 3 years. So I would say speaking to what's happening in Washington, we're still early in our program, as I mentioned. So as we start to gather initial returns on emissions reductions, we're really more focused right now, continue to be focused on program development. And we expect in the coming couple of years, we're going to have a clearer picture about some of the initial returns on emissions reductions. Some of the major things we're working on, as Mark mentioned, we are working on linkage with the California and Quebec carbon market. So we released a draft linkage agreement for public review last month. That's been out and available. That would define the agreement between our jurisdictions if it does get signed. And we are expecting to release very shortly draft findings on our linkage criteria. So we in Washington are required to do some analysis and evaluate some specific criteria for the benefits and costs potentially of linkage with other jurisdictions. So we are going to be releasing some draft findings on that presently. We're also completing an environmental justice assessment, which is required under our Healthy Environment for All Act in Washington. And also a environmental impact assessment as well. We would be finalizing all of these preparatory kind of documentation in advance of signing a linkage agreement, and we expect that it's possible to be operating a linkage market by 2027. So we continue to have open public comment and opportunity for feedback right now in Washington. And of course, we decided to do this the hard way. And so all 3 of our jurisdictions right now, Washington, California, Quebec, are all considering program adjustments. And so as we do updates to our program, we're also thinking about how we would work together. And so, of course, enjoying the complexity of that process. I guess the other thing that I would say is maybe a major area of focus for us is our industrial strategy. So we have, when our Cap and Invest program was developed, we had an initial emissions intensive trade exposed industry policy that was established to essentially as a placeholder for a more mature and longer term policy. And so we submitted a report to our legislature in January of this year that was responsive to some of the requirements to provide some analysis for policymakers to make decisions about how to advance an industrial policy in Washington. We're very focused in that. We focus quite a bit on no-cost allocation and various structures for that, consignment of allowance value for decarbonization, leakage assessments, and then complementary policies such as expansion of renewable power and an adequate electricity grid in the Western United States to help decarbonize industry. Our legislature passed a bill this year that essentially directed Ecology to complete some additional recommendations to the legislature. We hope for policy development to happen in our next legislative session next year in 2027. This bill also required emissions-intensive trade-exposed industries to complete decarbonization plans that must be completed by late 2028 and updated every 4 years afterwards. So as a springboard to looking at what decarbonization would look like and how to focus potentially value from no-cost allocation. So yeah, we hope to see some more development there. I'll say, without getting into, create time for others, I'll just say lastly that, there's a number of, we found in our legislative session this year, we had a number of issues that are really that are hot in Washington. One of them, we are considering the addition of a waste-to-energy facility in Washington. We have one facility in Washington, how to incorporate that under our Cap and Invest program. This issue of EITEs continues to be a policy issue. Data centers, we have a lot of proliferation of data centers in Washington. And so there's a lot of talk about how to regulate data centers more directly, how to define what a data center is, their use of renewable power, regulation under a Cap and Invest program, and the impact of the cost of power on Washington communities of expansion of power for these facilities. And then lastly, our Clean Energy Transformation Act, which is our carbon-free power law in Washington, is looking at we're looking at our initial deadline to create 80% carbon-free power by 2030. We're kind of approaching that deadline, and the reality of that is challenging. And so there's a lot of talk right now about whether that law adequately addresses those issues as utilities are working feverishly to establish renewable power, provide that for load, Washington load. So yeah, that's I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And I'm sure we'll come back to some of that in the Q&A, and I'm keen to leave some time for Q&A in a second. But last but not least, I want to go to José Pedro next, because it's been quite a big year also for Brazil, between advancing plans for ETS development, setting up an executive secretariat to take care of it, hosting COP, launching a declaration on compliance carbon markets at COP, among many other declarations, and last but not least, joining ICAP as our newest member in February of this year. So again, congratulations on all of those developments. Welcome to the ICAP family, and please tell us more about what Brazil is up to in the ETS space.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Stefan. It's a pleasure to be here. Congratulations to you and your team for this incredible report. This has been extremely helpful for our works here in the Brazilian government. So many thanks for all your work as well. I'm going to try to be a bit quick, because I'm also eager to have time for the Q&A session. But I'm going to first comment briefly on the report that's has gone out, and then I'm gonna bring some updates on our implementation effort here in Brazil. So I'm taking advantage of my position as the only speaker from an emerging country. The 2 points I wanted to highlight is where we touch upon the expansion of ETS experiences in emerging countries. I believe that this is really important, because I think it highlights that these countries, Brazil, China, India, and many others, Colombia, Mexico, they believe DTSs are flexible enough to accommodate different economic context. And in this sense, our major problem is, and the literature explores this, is the decoupling between growth and decarbonization. So if we manage to develop ETSs flexible enough with adjustments and other new features, but that can provide us with decarbonization together with economic growth and securing lower rates of poverty and other indexes that are really our key goals in our economies. I believe this will highlight the strength of ETS's mechanism as a whole. The second point I wanted to bring is that also you mentioned in the report that ETSs appear more and more frequently in the country's NDCs. And of course, this is, again, a proof that our strong belief in the instrument. But I think that this also poses the problem of coordination between other instruments. So it's part of our planning here in Brazil to advance in this coordination between different environmental assets, different instrument, different decarbonization policies. And I think that, of course, in Brazil, this is really important because the majority of our emissions comes from a sector that is not inside the ETS. So this is explicit a challenge for us. But this highlights how important this interoperability discussion will be in the future, not only between voluntary and compliance markets, but also between ETSs and other decarbonization policies, such as sectoral policies. Here in Brazil, we have a lot of energy specific, like SAF, SAF, and other sort of sectoral policies, land use regulation, and other green finance instruments. So I believe that this will be a common and hot topic in the next years for the ETS communities. Going now to the second part of my intervention here, I want to bring you a big picture of our efforts in the SBC implementation. For the last 3 to 4 months, we've been occupied with building the governance of our system. So we established the extraordinary secretariat for capital markets in the Ministry of Finance. And we also established the advisory board. So we had our first meeting last month, and we have a lot of activities planned. It's one of our missions to do this regulation together with the stakeholders and the regulated sectors. We believe that this is really instrumental to have a system that continues throughout the political cycle. And secondly, we are advancing on our definition of criteria for the acceptance of voluntary credits inside the system. We plan to roll out the normatives in the end of the year. And together with that, we are also working in the rules of engagement for Article 6 in Brazil. And this probably will be sooner, in the next month or so. We'll have more news to share about that. Regarding the ETS itself, we are moving towards defining the specific sectors that will be in the system from the get-go, and also the phase-in that we expect to have in the next years in terms of other sectors that are not exactly mature to be included in the system, but are already signaling to them that in the future they will be regulated. And together with this, the MRV rules, of course, is going to be specific for each sector. And by the end of the year, we expect to have them published. And finally, we've been working a lot with our European colleagues and Chinese colleagues on the Open Coalition for Compliance Capital Markets. Hopefully next month we'll have a decision on the governance, and later on September on the themes that will be discussed and debated within this forum. We're extremely happy with the development, and I think that the Open Coalition actually is a good summarization of our efforts and also of what appears in the report. So, in the sense that we have more and more developing countries using ETSs, I think it's completely fair to have a forum that recognizes this new balance of power between North and Global South countries, and then it stresses how good would be to have a forum where we can discuss all together the same topics such as MRV, such as offset use, topics that we are also discussing internally, and we'll have the opportunity to bring our understandings in this forum with our colleagues. So that's it from my side. Hopefully we're going to have some minutes for Q&A. Thank you very much, Stefano.
It looks to me like Stefano might be disconnected. So.
He's deep in contemplation, but thanks a lot, Jose Pedro. That really brings a really fresh perspective, actually. Thanks a lot for that. And we have just a few minutes, I'd say. We could potentially push a couple of minutes out if people are willing to stay. There's no obligation, though. So we have... there's a few questions from the chat. I'd like to address two of them, I think. One is there's a question here about Quebec, Washington, and California proposing integrating their carbon markets. Is this a regional trend? Any comments on that? And would we like to see the trend spread? I'd put this one to either Jean-Yves. I think let's put this question back to Jean-Yves, and
can we talk about trend? Maybe it is a big word, but definitely a desire to expand our cap and trade program, our carbon market. Originally, our market was designed with the collaboration of 10 different subnational governments in the US and Canada. Washington was part of the original founders, designer of WCI. Very happy to have them on board with the expectation to complete a linkage by July of next year. Other states are moving. Definitely, we are open to link with other jurisdictions, but before linking a system, you need to understand each other's system. It's about trust, so you need to start engaging, have a good collaboration, and then you can start thinking about linking. I would say yes, in the upcoming years, we can expect more linkage. In the very short term, maybe not. Well, Washington in the very short term, but yes, more linkage to be expected, let's say around 2030 probably. And why not internationally?
Yeah, and why not internationally? That's his, yeah.
We're already international.
Overseas. Let me say it that way.
I mean, this is great. It is you've shown that linking can work, but it's not as easy as the textbooks would say, but it's achievable, and there are real benefits for all linking partners as well. I take if we have one more moment. I'd like to put there's a question in the chat here from Jorge Gomez from the Ministry of Environment in Chile. This one would be a question rather which would go to Jose Pedro. It's I'm going to paraphrase this. Are you considering in your development of the ETS including crediting mechanisms that actually build in linkages between Article 6 mechanisms and the ETS that you're considering? Is this something that is on the table, and in what kind of way are you considering this?
In our legislation, actually, this is already defined. So the same sort of methodologies we accept in our regulated system will be eligible for Article 6 engagement. So the idea is that these criteria of accrediting methodologies in the system will serve as a sort of lighthouse effect. So like a reference of high quality methodologies that will show environmental integrity, etc., etc. So the type of methodologies accepted will be the same for Article 6 and the SBC, our ETS. What will be different is that we'll not allow unlimited amount of credits for Article 6. So we are in the discussion of what this number would be, what would be the limit, how we would channel these resources to the most sectors that need the most in light of our climate planning, etc., etc. So this is more or less where we are. Hopefully in the next month we'll have a solid text to share with all the parts that are interested in this.
Thanks a lot, Jose Pedro. I just realized I could have put the same question to Ruben from the where the development of the what's happening in the EU at the moment now, also considering opening to international credits, probably having a similar internal discussion. So I mean, this is one of the newer systems and one of the older systems currently considering what is in effect the same issue here. Maybe Ruben, you could make a small comment on that.
Yeah, I have to say that of course we have experience in the past with accepting international credits in the EU ETS, so the Clean Development Mechanism joint implementation under the Kyoto Protocol. Do you hear me well,
yeah,
Alex? Okay, good. And that was not necessarily very positive experience. I think that is still something that we, not a trauma, but something we carry along. And so it's not necessarily when we talk about integrating or international credits playing a part in Europe's overall economy-wide ambition is not necessarily translating directly into the possibility for ETS installations to surrender Article 6 credits instead of EU allowances. It's something I think we've been quite clear on that we're not a fan of and that we're not contemplating now. That does not mean that our installations cannot profit from international credits. Indirectly, they can, of course, profit because we need to do less domestically because we are buying international credits. And so they can benefit from international credits by doing nothing, by simply having to achieve a lower environmental ambition in 2040, not 90, but maybe 85. And that way they have the benefits they want, more emission space without the administrative hassle. But of course, that means that these credits need to be bought. And so what we are saying is, look, if as ETS we're going to be benefiting from lower ambition, then we also need to put the money on the table to make sure that the credits are bought and that they are top quality, so Article 6 quality. And that is probably what we will propose, and then it will be for our member states and our European Parliament to see, okay, do we want to pay for international credits? Do we want to pay for international action? Or do we want to keep this money in the EU, invest in the EU, in emission reductions, and do more domestically rather than internationally? So it's a bit more skeptical, but that's probably the way we'll go ahead with it. But you'll see in July what we propose.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your input, and thanks a lot to all of our speakers for your input, and also to everybody for staying a bit longer. Sorry we went a bit over time there, and also we've unfortunately lost Stefano there. So sorry about that technical glitch.
I'm actually back.
I'm sure he's okay. Oh, there's the
Can you
voice
hear me?
there somewhere. Yeah. Fantastic.
We can hear you, but we cannot see you for some reason.
Oh, that's all right. But
then
carry
I would
on,
let
Alex.
you. I'd let you give a couple of final words, Stefano, before we round this off. Thanks.
Thank you. And I mean, from my side, again, big thanks to the ICAP team, first of all, for the great effort and the work on yet another great status report. Big thanks to today's panelists, so Ruben, Rufina, Mark, Andy, and Jose Pedro for joining us. And again, congratulations on all the developments that you just reported on. Big thank you also again to all ICAP members, observers, and partners involved in the production of the report. And thank you all for joining us. Again, I would encourage you to have a look at the report. It's on our website already. And we will do this again tomorrow morning with another set of panelists. So we will have a second launch report early in the European morning, a bit more focused on developments in the Asia Pacific, which, as we saw from the infographics, do make for some of the most interesting developments and also upcoming prospects. So if you have an interest and if you're in the right time zone, join us again tomorrow for insights on a different region of the world. With that, thank you all, and thank you for joining us, and have a nice rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone.